The Iberian Peninsula, Iberian Peninsula, also known as Iberia, Iberi, is located in the southwest corner of Europe and is divided among three states: Spain, Portugal, and Andorra, as well as Gibraltar, an overseas territory of the United Kingdom, with an area of approximately 582,000 square kilometers. It is the third largest European peninsula, after the Scandinavian and Balkan peninsulas. Greek name. The English word Iberia was adapted from the use of the ancient Greek word iota, beta, eta, rho, iota, alpha by Greek geographers under the rule of the Roman Empire, to refer to what is known today in English as the Iberian Peninsula. At that time, the name did not describe a single political entity or a distinct population of people. Strabo's Iberia was delineated from Celtic by the Pyrenees and included the entire landmass southwest of there. The ancient Greeks discovered the Iberian Peninsula by voyaging westward. Hecataeus of Miletus was the first known to use the term around 500 BC. Herodotus of Halicarnassus says of the Phocaeans that it was they who made the Greeks acquainted with Iberia. According to Strabo, prior historians used Iberia to mean the country this side of the beta, eta, rho, omicron, sigma, as far north as the river Rhone in France. But currently they set the Pyrenees as the limit. Polybius respects that limit, but identifies Iberia as the Mediterranean side as far south as Gibraltar, with the Atlantic side having no name. Elsewhere he says that Saguntum is on the seaward foot of the range of hills connecting Iberia and Celtiberia. Strabo refers to the Caretanians as people of the Iberian stock, living in the Pyrenees, who are to be distinguished from either Celts or Celtiberians. Roman names. According to Charles Ebel, the ancient sources in both Latin and Greek use Hispania and Iberia as synonyms. The confusion of the words was because of an overlapping in political and geographic perspectives. The Latin word Iberia, similar to the Greek Iberia, literally translates to land of the Iberians. This word was derived from the river Ebron, which the Romans called Hyberus. Hyber was thus used as a term for peoples living near the river Ebron. The first mention in Roman literature was by the annalist poet Quintus Ennius in 200 BC. The Romans had broad experience with the peoples on the peninsula acquired during the long conflict with Carthage. Virgil refers to the Iparkatos Hyberos in his Georgics. The Roman geographers and other prose writers from the time of the late Roman Republic called the entire peninsula Hispania. As they became politically interested in the former Carthaginian territories, the Romans began to use the names Hispania Citeria and Hispania Ulteria for near and far Hispania. At the time, Hispania was made up of three Roman provinces: Hispania Boetica, Hispania Tarraconensis, and Hispania Lusitania. Strabo says that the Romans use Hispania and Iberia synonymously, distinguishing between the near northern and the far southern provinces. Whatever language may generally have been spoken on the peninsula soon gave way to Latin, except for that of the Vascones, which was preserved as a language isolate by the barrier of the Pyrenees. Etymology. The Iberian Peninsula has always been associated with the Ebro River, Iberus in ancient Greek and Iberus or Hyberus in Latin. The association was so well known it was hardly necessary to state. For example, Iberia was the country this side of the Iberus. In Strabo, Pliny goes so far as to assert that the Greeks had called the whole of Spain Iberia because of the Hyberus River. The river appears in the Ebro Treaty of 226 BC between Rome and Carthage, setting the limit of Carthaginian interest at the Ebro. The fullest description of the treaty, stated in Appian, uses Iberus. With reference to this border, Polybius states that the native name is Iber, apparently the original word, stripped of its Greek or Latin os or s termination. The early range of these natives, stated by the geographers and historians to be from southern Spain to southern France along the Mediterranean coast, is marked by instances of a readable script expressing a yet unknown language. dubbed Iberian. Whether this was the native name or was given to them by the Greeks for their residence on the Ebro remains unknown. Credence in Polybius imposes certain limitations on etymologizing. If the language remains unknown, the meanings of the words, including Iber, must also remain unknown. In modern Basque, the word Ibar means valley, or watered meadow, while Ibai means river. But there is no proof relating the etymology of the Ebro River with these Basque names. Prehistory. Paleolithic. The Iberian Peninsula has been inhabited for at least 1.2 million years, as remains found in the sites at Atapuerca demonstrate. Among these sites is the cave of Grandolina, where 6 hominid skeletons, dated between 780,000 and 1 million years ago, were found in 1994. Experts have debated whether these skeletons belong to the species Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, or a new species called Homo antecessor. Around 200,000 BC, during the Lower Paleolithic period, Neanderthals first entered the Iberian Peninsula. Around 70,000 BC, during the Middle Paleolithic period, the last glacial event began and the Neanderthal Mousterian culture was established. Around 35,000 BC, during the Upper Paleolithic, the Neanderthal Chat-Eperonian cultural period began. Emanating from southern France, this culture extended into the north of the peninsula. It continued to exist until around 28,000 BC, when Neanderthal man faced extinction. At about the 40th millennium BC, modern humans entered the Iberian Peninsula from southern France. Here, this genetically homogeneous population developed the M343 mutation, giving rise to the R1b haplogroup, still the most common in modern Portuguese and Spanish males. On the Iberian Peninsula, modern humans developed a series of different cultures, such as the Aurignacian, Gravitian, Solutrean and Magdalenian cultures, some of them characterized by complex forms of Paleolithic art. Neolithic. During the Neolithic expansion, various megalithic cultures developed in the Iberian Peninsula. An open seas navigation culture from the East Mediterranean, called the Cardium culture, also extended its influence to the eastern coasts of the peninsula, possibly as early as the 5th millennium BC. These people may have had some relation to the subsequent development of the Iberian civilization. Chalcolithic. In the Chalcolithic or Copper Age, a series of complex cultures developed that would give rise to the peninsula's first civilizations and to extensive exchange networks reaching to the Baltic, Middle East and North Africa. Around 2800–2700 BC, the Bell Beaker culture, which produced the maritime bell beaker, probably originated in the vibrant copper-using communities of the Tagus estuary in Portugal and spread from there to many parts of Western Europe. Bronze Age. Bronze Age cultures developed beginning c. 1800 BC, when the civilization of Los Miles was followed by that of Ouargar. From this center, bronze technology spread to other areas, such as those of the Bronze of Levante, southwestern Iberian Bronze and Cogitasi. In the Late Bronze Age, the urban civilization of Tarsus developed in the area of modern western Andalusia, characterized by Phoenician influence and using the Tartessian script for its Tartessian language, not related to the Iberian language. Some scholars believe that early in the 1st millennium BC, several waves of pre-Celts and Celts migrated from Central Europe, thus partially changing the peninsula's ethnic landscape to Indo-European in its northern and western regions. In northwestern Iberia, a Celtic culture developed, the Castro culture, with a large number of hill forts and some fortified cities. Proto History. By the Iron Age, starting in the 7th century BC, the Iberian Peninsula consisted of complex agrarian and urban civilizations, either pre-Celtic or Celtic. The cultures of the Iberians in the eastern and southern zones and the cultures of the Aquitanian in the western portion of the Pyrenees. The seafaring Phoenicians. Greeks and Carthaginians successively settled along the Mediterranean coast and founded trading colonies there over a period of several centuries. Around 1100 BC, Phoenician merchants founded the trading colony of Gadir or Gades near Tarsus. In the 8th century BC, the first Greek colonies, such as Emporion, were founded along the Mediterranean coast on the east, leaving the south coast to the Phoenicians. The Greeks coined the name Iberia, after the river Iber. In the 6th century BC, the Carthaginians arrived in the peninsula while struggling with the Greeks for control of the western Mediterranean. Their most important colony was Carthago Nova. History. Roman rule in 218 BC, during the Second Punic War against the Carthaginians. The first Roman troops invaded the Iberian Peninsula and annexed it under Augustus after 2 centuries of war with the Celtic and Iberian tribes and the Phoenician, Greek and Carthaginian colonies, resulting in the creation of the province of Hispania. It was divided into Hispania Ulteria and Hispania Citeria during the late Roman Republic, and during the Roman Empire. It was divided into Hispania Tarraconensis in the northeast, Hispania Boetica in the south and Lusitania in the southwest. Hispania supplied the Roman Empire with food, olive oil, wine, and metal. The emperors Trajan, Hadrian, and Theodosius I, the philosopher Seneca, and the poets Martial and Lucan were born from families living on the peninsula. Germanic kingdoms. In the early 5th century, Germanic tribes invaded the peninsula, namely the Suebi, the Vandals and their allies, the Sarmatian Alans. Only the kingdom of the Suebi would endure after the arrival of another wave of Germanic invaders, the Visigoths, who conquered all of the Iberian Peninsula and expelled or partially integrated the Vandals and the Alans. The Visigoths eventually conquered the Suebi kingdom and its capital city Bracara in 584 to 585. They would also conquer the province of the Byzantine Empire of Spania in the south of the peninsula and the Balearic Islands. Islamic rule. In AD 711, a Muslim army invaded the Visigothic kingdom in Hispania, under Tariq ibn Ziyad. The Islamic army landed at Gibraltar and brought most of the Iberian Peninsula under Islamic control in an 8-year campaign. Al-Andalus is the Arabic name given the Iberian Peninsula by its Muslim, Berber and Arab conquerors. From the 8th–15th centuries, the Iberian Peninsula was incorporated into the Islamic world and became a center of culture and learning, especially during the Caliphate of Córdoba, which reached its height under the rule of Abd-ar-Rahman III. The Muslims, which were initially Arabs and Berbers, included local Iberian converts, the so-called Muladi, who formed the majority of the Iberian population by the year 1100. The Muslims were referred to by the generic name Moors. Thus, before the so-called Reconquista gained momentum, the Iberian Peninsula had been transformed from a mainly Romance-speaking Christian land into a mainly Arabic-speaking Muslim land. However, pockets of Arabic and Romance-speaking Christians called Mozarabs survived throughout Al-Andalus, in addition to a large minority of Arabic-speaking Jews. Reconquest. Many of the ousted Gothic nobles took refuge in the unconquered North Asturian highlands. From there, they aimed to reconquer their lands from the Moors. This war of reconquest is known as the Reconquista. Christian and Muslim kingdoms fought and allied among themselves. The Muslim Taifa kings competed in patronage of the arts. The Way of St. James attracted pilgrims from all Western Europe, and the Jewish population set the basis of Sephardic culture. During the Middle Ages, the peninsula housed many small states including Castile, Aragon, Navarre, Leon and Portugal. The peninsula was part of the Islamic Almohad Empire until they were finally uprooted. The last major Muslim stronghold was Granada, which was conquered by a combined Castilian and Aragonese force in 1492. Muslims and Jews throughout the period were variously tolerated or shown intolerance in different Christian kingdoms. However, after the conquest of Granada, all Muslims and Jews were ordered to convert to Christianity or face expulsion. Many Jews and Muslims fled to North Africa and the Ottoman Empire, while others publicly converted to Christianity and became known respectively as Marranos and Moriscos. However, many of these continued to practice their religion in secret. The Moriscos revolted several times and were ultimately forcibly expelled from Spain in the early 17th century. Post-Reconquest, the small states gradually amalgamated over time, with the exception of Portugal, even if for a brief period the whole peninsula was united politically under the Iberian Union. After that point, the modern position was reached and the peninsula now consists of the countries of Spain and Portugal, Andorra, French Cerdagne and Gibraltar.